Καλημέρα σας. Καλημέρα σε όλους και καλώς ήρθατε στο τρίτο Athens Fashion Film Festival. Ο τίτλος της φετινής διοργάνωσης είναι «Touch me not, μη μου άπτου». Είναι η πρώτη φορά που κάνουμε ψηφιακή πρεμιέρα, χωρίς όλους εσάς φέτος. Ωστόσο, με χαροποιεί πολύ το γεγονός ότι έχουμε και πάλι δίπλα μας τους σταθερούς μας συνεργάτες και υποστηρικτές του φεστιβάλ, το Υπουργείο Πολιτισμού, την Ιταλική Πρεσβεία, το Ινστιτούτο Ιταλιάνο di Cultura, την Εταιρεία Ανάπτυξης και Τουριστικής Προβολής Αθηνών, αλλά και νέους συνεργάτες, όπως το Τσέχικο Κέντρο Αθηνών και βέβαια το ΕΚΟΜΕ, που στάθηκε δίπλα μας φέτος στην πολύ σημαντική πρωτοβουλία Design in Film, που ξεκινάει επίσημα αύριο. Λοιπόν, θα πω δύο λόγια για το φετινό πρόγραμμα, για να μην πάρω πολύ χρόνο, γιατί έχουμε ήδη χάσει χρόνο από την ώρα την προγραμματισμένη. Το φετινό πρόγραμμα έχει δομηθεί γύρω σε τρεις άξονες, πολύ σημαντικοί και οι τρεις. Το διεθνές διαγωνιστικό, με το νεοσύστατο ελληνικό διαγωνιστικό τμήμα, για το οποίο είμαστε πάρα πολύ χαρούμενοι. 11 ταινίες μεγάλου μήκους, ενταγμένες σε διάφορες θεματικές, όπως τη θεματική design in film, Touch me not, και μια σειρά από καταπληκτικά ντοκιμαντέρ, βιογραφίες μεγάλων εμπνευσμένων σχεδιαστών μόδας. Και τέλος, τις διαδικτυακές συζητήσεις, όπως η σημερινή, που είναι η πρώτη ενός κύκλου που θα είναι μέχρι το τέλος, θα συνεχίσει μέχρι το τέλος του φεστιβάλ. Εδώ με τίτλο, η σημερινή μας συζήτηση έχει τίτλο Big Production Filming, The Case of Greece. Έχουμε επιλέξει να εστιάσουμε στην Ελλάδα σαν προορισμό γυρισμάτων κινηματογραφικών και τηλεοπτικών παραγωγών. Ευχαριστώ λοιπόν θερμά τους καλεσμένους μας και θα ξεκινήσω με τον φίλο και παραγωγό Rick Porras, my friend, good friend and producer Rick Porras, τον επίσης παραγωγό Richard Sharkey και τον πρόεδρο του ΕΚΟΜΕ Πάνο Κουάνη για το χρόνο τους, και θα περάσω τώρα τον λόγο στο συντονιστή μας, Patrice Vivancos. Πατρίς, ο λόγος σε σένα. Σε ευχαριστώ και σένα για τη συμβολή σου. Ο λόγος πια σε σένα. Σας εύχομαι σε όλους τους καλές προβολές. Να είστε μαζί μας, να μείνετε μαζί μας μέχρι το τέλος του φεστιβάλ. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
So yeah, my name is Rick Porras, and I was lucky and blessed enough to meet Richard Sharkey back on Lord of the Rings years ago, and we've been close friends ever since. And I'm excited to be able to do this panel with you, Sharkey, and also with Pános, who I was able to meet back in February of last year before we went into this lovely COVID experience. So great to see you again, Pános. Should I go ahead and talk a bit about? Okay. Yeah. Well, for us as people from outside of Greece, it's really important to be able to handle a lot of different aspects of film production. So why don't we first talk a little bit about Pános?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I would like to thank Nicole and Maria for the invitation and for their hospitality. I am Pános Κουάνης, President and CEO of ΕΚΟΜΕ, the National Center of Audiovisual Media and Communication in Greece, an organization supervised by the Ministry of Digital Governance. 3 years ago, we embarked on a very adventurous journey. It was difficult and demanding, full of obstacles, but at the same time exciting, at the very end, very rewarding, as with hard work, persistence, and perseverance, we managed to accomplish a lot more than we expected in a very short period of time. Our initial plan may have sounded or looked simple, especially in the eyes and ears of an outsider. Sorry? But for someone who knows our country, it wasn't. And what was the idea? To make our country a film-friendly country. What this meant in practice was to create a whole ecosystem, a set of infrastructures that combined operate in harmony and in such a way that reveal the real potential of our country, Greece. What it can offer to its own people, as well to the producers from all over the world who decide to visit us and honor us with their presence in order to materialize their film or TV production in Greece. Today, I am proud to say we are all actually proud at ΕΚΟΜΕ to say that we have accomplished this task. We have managed to create successfully and constantly test a permanent system that allows the creative industry of filmmaking and storytelling from all over the world to come to Greece and be able to thrive and produce with all the necessary tools in hand. Our aim was to create very attractive incentives and at the same time be able to facilitate in the most efficient way producers and production service companies coming from all over the world in order to materialize the story in Greece for audiences to watch and upload. In order to accomplish that, we started with the very basics, as we live in the material world, money. But we ended up with the most important thing in life, which is people. Let me elaborate on that. The first thing that we did was we provided the industry with a strong and competitive financial incentive. To be more accurate, we created two incentives. We currently have a very successful cash rebate program of 40% with a cap of 12 million euros and the eligibility of non-resident labor for projects over 8 million euros in Greece. Eligible expenses include above the line up to 35% of the total eligible expenses incurred in Greece, non-resident labor up to 50% of total eligible expenses, and most of the below-the-line expenses with a few limitations, exclusions. I won't go into detail for that. Producers may visit our website or get in touch with us, and we are more than willing to provide them with all the necessary information. We also created a tax relief program for potential investors in order to attract private investors in filmmaking that deducts actually 30% of eligible expenses of a film production from the net taxable income of an individual or a legal entity. The tax rebate program may be combined with the cash rebate program and has the same eligible costs. The other thing that we did is that we created the basic infrastructure for servicing the production companies coming to Greece. This new service-oriented approach in our country focused on providing tailor-made full services with less bureaucracy in two levels. The initial service provided by ΕΚΟΜΕ, who created a central point of communication for the whole application process and implementation of a production in Greece, with an easy and fast-track process, as both the cash rebate and the tax relief programs operate through an online electronic application system from the very beginning of the initial application during pre-production of the film to the very end with the payment of the cash rebate or the tax return. It is an easy process made to work for each individual project with basic and simple requirements: the script and the cultural test, the budget and the financial plan, cast and crew information. The Greek cash rebate program is highly bankable. It can be used for gap financing and short-term loans for cash flow of the production. It is co-production friendly as it may be combined with other state aid programs up to 80% of the eligible budget, and it is undoubtedly credible as we have a two-tier auditing system. Your only obligation as a production is to come to Greece, use our locations and people, and mention us in the credits. And for that, we have created a very, very attractive logo.
Great.
We also provide producers and unfortunate changes in the production, which in filmmaking happen very often. Another thing that we provide is the service provided on location. For that, we cooperated and still cooperate closely with the 13 prefectures in the two key cities, Athens and Thessaloniki, in order to set up the local film offices. Those initial 15 film offices all over Greece provide production service companies with all the necessary information and assistance, a variety of locations depending on the needs of each project, the permits for shooting, local cast and crew, especially extras, solutions in accommodation, transportation, and catering issues. Our aim is to provide guidance and highly personalized service with confidentiality from a team of experts on location and at ΕΚΟΜΕ. And that is for any budget, low, medium, or high. We value all productions coming to our country. Shall I go on, or do you want me to?
Well, let me just ask you this, and then I'll turn to Sharkey, who's got even more, immediate, experiences. But I guess the question I have, and I want to catch it with my own experience that I had with Sharkey from years ago, which is that, New Zealand really did a wonderful job, before even Lord of the Rings showed up, putting together a tax incentive credit that worked and that was significant for productions to consider, and then also put effort into figuring out what was important to New Zealand, which was, you know, in one respect, creating a collaborative environment, but also having an environmental, you know, message. You know, that's very important to New Zealand for obvious reasons. It's a beautiful place, and it's part of its brand. And in a way, it kind of mirrors what Greece has at its disposal, just such natural beauty. And so they created these environmental standards before we showed up with Lord of the Rings, so that they already had systems in place, people in place, so that a production like Lord of the Rings and the ones that followed could actually work well in the country, and not in a disruptive way, but in a positive way, and in as much of a zero footprint as possible way. And, you know, that was something that took them a few years to get going, because they realized that was something that was really important to their society. You know, another thing they did is they really opened up the interaction with government as well as the military. So we actually had roads that were built by the New Zealand Army Corps of Engineers. It was great. They got practice at working on roads, which is something they're always wanting to practice on. And for us, it was great because we got to, you know, get proper roads into some locations that were maybe difficult to reach. And then we had this nice kind of handoff between government and business where, you know, there was a really strong digital fat pipe they'd created there for data, and we were able to interact with New Zealand Telecom, and we started to use some of their satellite ability for our own communications out in the field, and doing things now that we take for granted, like video conferencing. And then lastly, they did a great job at really getting the word out to all the local communities, and it became sort of a group effort. You know, that we had so much support from all the different areas we went to, and it was all very positive. And there was just such great goodwill to productions, not just Lord of the Rings, but the ones that followed. And I think that's something that really has gone a long way to growing that industry. And it feels to me, from the bit that we've discussed in the past, that that's really starting to happen in Greece. You've put a lot of effort in lining certain things up for a few years now and growing. You know, I know Greece has had tough times in the past, but it really does feel like there's this desire to create that goodwill, that is so important, and have that synergy between the government and local business and these productions coming in. Is there anything that you're finding that you know, you still are working on, that you still, you know, feel like, hey, we can keep doing better in a certain area, or do you feel like you're starting to find that sweet spot?
Well, the thing is that, you know, well, first of all, I have to say that, you know, New Zealand is an amazing example. It's a real success story, and we've been we've been studying New Zealand and how they, you know, how New Zealand managed, you know, to actually be so competitive in a few years, thanks to all this effort that you explained to us. Well, you know, especially during 2020, we've been following very closely the competition, you know, during the crisis, and we've been trying to find ways to come back, you know, be more proactive, and that's why last year we immediately after, you know, the pandemic, when the lockdown finished and the country opened, we made the two major changes in the rebate, as we saw, you know, other countries, you know, being very, very active and very proactive in this area. You know, Spain changed its rebate; it went up, you know, much higher, and other countries also. So anyway, we always try to see what goes wrong, if there is something that we can ameliorate and make much better in any aspect, whether it's the financial incentives or the infrastructure. The film offices are now opening slowly, so there are many problems there that we are facing during this initial stage of setting them up all over Greece. There are also sometimes problems with permits, and this is something that we have to make sure that we respect. This is what you said also, you know, that we have to respect the the monuments and the sites and everything, they should be open, for shooting, but at the same time, the production companies and the cast and crew working has to respect the locations.
Πάνω, συγγνώμη. Αν μου επιτρέπεις, θα ήθελα εγώ να κάνω μια ερώτηση στο Ρίτσαρντ. Ναι, ένα άλλο ωραίο παράδειγμα είναι το Μάρκο Πόλο, η σειρά Μάρκο Πόλο, έτσι, που θα μπορούσαμε να συζητήσουμε. Το γεγονός είναι ότι η σειρά Μάρκο Πόλο είναι μια εξαιρετική περιπτωσιολογική μελέτη. Άρα, αν έχουμε το Μάρκο Πόλο φυσικά, έχουμε τη Βενετία, αλλά όχι την Κίνα ή τη Μογγολία. Έχουμε το Καζακστάν και τη Μαλαισία. Και ακόμη έχουμε την Ουγγαρία και τη Σλοβακία για κάποιες σκηνές. Ας αρχίσουμε από την αρχή, έτσι. Γιατί το Καζακστάν? Να δούμε αυτό πρώτα. Ας δούμε μια ιδέα.
So the decision-making process with respect to where we would shoot Marco Polo started a couple of years before we decided to plant ourselves in Malaysia. In the beginning, it was felt that China would be the right place to go. The Chinese were very proactive in promising all sorts of money, financial support, and political support. We got very close to making the deal there, but then we realized that there was going to be some government sensitivity towards the way in which we told the story. In other words, that would be censorship. And our creatives and our producers weren't comfortable with the interference that might have taken place. And at the same time, Malaysia had just built themselves film studios down in southern Malaysia on the border with Singapore. And they were looking for a partner, a first tenant to go in. And it was felt that the numbers added up with at the time, it was a 30% rebate and it was uncapped. We were spending, $100 million or more on that show. And so it felt like a very good place to go. We felt we needed to be in Asia at the very least. However, Malaysia doesn't have the big vistas and landscapes that Mongolia would have had, which is where the show is set. So the first thing I did was fly up to Mongolia to have a look. It is undoubtedly beautiful. It is the right place to be creatively. However, they didn't have a film industry. They had no infrastructure, and they also had very poor communication links. We could not fly a crew of 300 or 400 people into Mongolia and enjoy any sort of level of success. And so down in Kazakhstan, they had about 6 or 8 years earlier shot a movie called Nomad, which was it was a story of the Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan dynasty. Beautiful movie. And that was my next stop. So I went to Kazakhstan. There was no rebate there, but they did have these incredibly unique vistas, and they had a film industry infrastructure. The president there has been for many years supportive of film. And for us, the best thing that they had was horses and horsemen. We could easily find 200 or 300 horsemen, to go in front of the camera, dress them up, and these guys have been riding horses since they were 2 years old. So that's why Kazakhstan and not Mongolia or China. And that was season 1. Now, season 2, however, Kazakhstan was very difficult still to get in and out of. And it made it very expensive. So in season 2, we figured, well, where else could we go that had big, wide vistas? And maybe it wasn't as beautiful as Kazakhstan, but Hungary gave us the opportunity to not only tick the box of landscapes that worked, horsemen, a legacy, a history of horsemen, but also a very developed film industry, which has proven very successful over the last 20 years, supported by a very robust and reliable rebate system. So for us, it all happened in the right order. The creativity was number one, it's fantastic, then the infrastructure, and then the finance. Typically, however, when you go to a studio with a new story, the very first question they will ask you about is the rebate. And so it's very pleasing to see that Greece, can tick that box very, very easily. The next thing as a line producer that I'd be looking for is the infrastructure. Do we have to bring everybody in from outside, or is there some kind of established film industry? Is that developed enough to support the level of production value that we're bringing in? And that's usually defined by the size of budget that we have. And then finally, it usually is the landscapes and the creativity, et cetera, et cetera. So there is no right or wrong way or right or wrong order for these things to happen, as long as they happen.
Sharkey, do you feel it? Sharkey, is there anything that those are the standard things that you're seeing on every country on some level? Are there certain things that you found in certain countries that you think has been quite beneficial to that country in terms of the way it's evolved with fostering these types of productions? Like in terms of South Africa, you mentioned once what they were doing.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, South Africa is a very good case in point. I recently shot 2 seasons of a show called Warrior down there, which you can see on the HBO Max channel. Just arrived a few weeks ago. I'll plug in for that. When I was first approached about that show, I was asked, where can we afford to make this? Because it was set in the 1880s. It was set in Chinatown of San Francisco. And so you wouldn't necessarily expect that we would end up shooting this thing at a studio in Cape Town in South Africa. There's not a huge Chinese community down there, for example, but there was enough for us to work with. South Africa, they have a rebate. It's not a huge rebate in comparison to what Greece is putting forwards, and it is limited to a certain extent. However, what they had was very experienced, very cost-effective labor, and I was able to make that particular show on a much lower rebate, but only forgetting about cast, only bringing 5 technicians from overseas to make it work. Whereas usually I'll bring 300 technicians from overseas to make something work. So the fact that their rebate was much, much lower was made up for the fact that their skills level, their skills base, and their experience with, quote unquote, Hollywood productions was much more higher and more relevant. And they got to that position over the last 10 or 15 years of focusing a huge amount on skills, training, apprenticeships, and knowledge transfer. And that's something that, I was happy and lucky and proud enough to get involved in. And each season as we went through, we would hire between 35 and 40 young kids who are coming out of film school or some education program to work with us. And then the second year, half of those at least, we brought them back in fully paying positions. So that was very gratifying, very important. And, for me, one of the nicest things that happened in the early days of that show was that a guy came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hi, Rich, do you remember me?" And it was a guy I'd met 15 years ago when I'd been doing a Michael Mann movie in South Africa. At the time, he was basically a street kid. And 15 years later, he was our best boy. So he was our second in charge electrician. He owned a bunch of trucks with equipment. He employed people. He had a wife and a family. He had 2 cars. He had a mortgage and all that debt that we are so used to and we aspire to. So, when I met that guy again, he was living proof that the education and knowledge transfer works. The benefits to society and the people work. And the fact that we were there means that the rebate and the economic system is working for South Africa.
Yeah, and I like the way they made the most of that moment. They actually built that into their system. You know, in New Zealand, they did similar things, but they also benefited from just some good luck of having camera crews that were used to doing a lot of commercials, a lot of car commercials. So they were used to using the latest cameras. So we didn't, as you recall, we didn't have to worry about that with the camera crew. And, you know, departments like costume department were actually used to doing gigantic productions because there had been Herc and Xena TV show prior to. So we benefited in some areas, but there were in other areas that were new. You know, there had never been a grip crew, you know, doing anything for the size that we had in Rings. You know, the typical grip crews before Lord of the Rings were 2 and 3 persons, right?
I believe that, you know, that building skills and specialized skills for crew especially is very important. And when a big production comes to a country, they bring the skills and the expertise, you know, from the crew from abroad, you know. But from your experience, do you think that, you know, specialized educational programs, you know, training programs or internship programs, you know, with production companies, do they help in building you know, specialized crew?
Yes, is the short answer. I mean, what I think was most successful in South Africa is that, you know, they had their education system. There were people who had been motivated enough to go to film school or to go to college and learn about, you know, programming for visual effects. That's something that's very, very strong in South Africa right now. Their visual effects business is growing, and it's exactly what happened in New Zealand. And now they have Weta in New Zealand, who is arguably the leading visual effects company in the world. But the problem that certainly had in Cape Town to begin with was they would come out of college and out of school and they'd have nowhere to go. They'd have no practical contacts. So the training and development agencies, who were actually at the time nothing to do with the Film Commission, they later sort of merged. But the training and development agencies, you know, went to the Film Commission and the film producers and said, would you please ask the incoming international shows to take on 5 or 6 technicians or 5 or 6 trainees, and we will pay them, as in the training commission would give them some kind of small payment. My company, our company, would insure them, make sure that they were legal and legitimate on set. And then at the end of 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever the length of the production might have been, they came out with real world, vocational, hands-on experience, and more importantly, some contacts. And those people who would then, the established freelancers who'd go on to the next show, would naturally take them with them and then give them proper jobs, leaving space for the next entrance.
Richard, ένα ερώτημα παρακαλώ. Καταλαβαίνουμε τη σπουδαιότητα της γνώσης, της εμπειρογνωμοσύνης σε κάποιες χώρες. Η Αφρική, η Νότια Αφρική είναι ένα πολύ καλό παράδειγμα. Αλλά είπατε ότι φέρατε μόνο 5 τεχνικούς στην Νότια Αφρική, αν άκουσα καλά, λέει ο Πατρίς, σωστά? Πόσους φέρατε στη Μαλαισία ή στο Καζακστάν?
Well, in Malaysia, I brought in 600 technicians, but it was a different show as well. Warrior, you know, the season budget for a show like Warrior was about $30 million, give or take. And the part of the reason for that was that we could employ locally, which made South Africa very local. In fact, it made the difference between shooting the series and it not ever happening, because the studio weren't prepared to put any more than a certain amount of money in. So, you know, a lot of the American creative team weren't very happy that they had to leave home and then they had to go halfway around the world and live in Africa. They didn't understand that what a beautiful place it was. At the end, they were all crying because they didn't want to leave. And I have this experience a lot. However, in Malaysia, where there was no established film industry back in 2013, I think, when we went there for the first time, yeah, they had a small industry that was used to working on local productions and maybe the odd commercial that came through. And that was very established in Kuala Lumpur. And their business model, their infrastructure was geared towards charging relatively high prices for very short periods of time. And when I said to the guys in Kuala Lumpur, hey, would you like to come and work for 9 months for me down in southern Malaysia, but I can't afford to pay your short-term commercial prices, nobody wanted to give up the life that they'd built in Kuala Lumpur, because the local industry and the local commercials industry serving international crews could pay a lot more on a daily basis. But long-form drama, frankly, doesn't pay as well if you're a rank and file crew member. And that applies to whether you're working in Los Angeles on TV scale or on feature films. It's starting to change. However, that is starting to change because, companies like Netflix, Amazon, Apple, the major global streaming platforms are now demanding that the quality and production design and production values are so much higher that they must meet feature film standards now. And the only way you get that is by employing feature film crew. And the feature film crew say, well, why should I work for less money?
Ωραία, για να κατανοήσω λίγο καλύτερα. Εσείς πάτε σε μια ξένη χώρα για την κρύβη μιας ταινίας. Έχετε το πρόγραμμα έκπτωσης φόρου ή επιστροφής χρημάτων από τη μία πλευρά. Έχετε το κόστος ζωής, ωραία, ενώ στη μέση έχετε το κόστος του προσωπικού που φέρνετε ή που πρέπει να προσλάβετε. Αυτό σημαίνει ένα συγκεκριμένο κομμάτι της παραγωγής. Ποιο βαραίνει περισσότερο μεταξύ των τριών?
For me, it's fairly easy because what the studios tend to do, because they are run by financiers. I mean, it is a business. So for so many years, I was given scripts and people would say to me, "How much do you think this will cost?" And I'd go away and I'd spend weeks and weeks doing a budget, and I'd come back and they'd say, "Well, that's too much. It needs to be $20 million cheaper." So I'd say, "Well, why didn't you tell me that to begin with?" So now I ask the studios, how much money have you got to spend? And then I back into the number. And so those three variables that you're talking about the level of rebate, the availability of infrastructure, the quality and the cost of living and the cost of the actual crew members, they're different. The equation is different in every country, but you end up at the same number. And so then I go back to the studios and say, all right, you can go to any one of these three countries and spend the same amount of money, but then I switch it around and say, but creatively, you will gain this in this country, you'll have to give that up in another country. It will take you longer to shoot somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Or it might be that the actor doesn't want to go halfway around the world and wants to just shoot in their backyard and take their kids to school every day. There's so many variables in play.
Or I think that's when people start thinking, well, how safe do I feel there? How comfortable will it be? How easy will it be? Is that country known for being a bit problematic? I'm willing to deal with those issues because those locations are so special. Or you know what? Life's too short. Where are we going to be able to do something that doesn't get in the way of us getting that shooting day that Sharkey was talking about? Just in terms of, can you get your days more easily in one place over another? So a lot of that psychological, you could argue, kind of kicks in after you've looked at those numbers that have all balanced out in one way or another.
So
Εγώ θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω τον Πάνο κάτι το οποίο εγώ ανακάλυψα με έκπληξη, και αυτό είναι μια εργασία του ΕΚΟΜΕ. Πάντοτε έχουμε στο μυαλό για την Ελλάδα ότι έχουμε πολύ ωραία τοπία, τα νησιά, το λευκό, τα λευκά σπίτια στα νησιά, τη θάλασσα κτλ. Αλλά κατάλαβα καλά, πολλά φιλμ ήρθαν στην ταινία για να γυρίσουν κάπου αλλού στην Ελλάδα. Πάνω, 2 λόγια γι' αυτό παρακαλώ. Είναι μια καινούργια εικόνα της Ελλάδας που θέλετε να πουλήσετε ή να προτείνετε στους κύριους παραγωγούς? Ναι, φυσικά.
There are two kinds of scripts. There are the kinds of scripts that are made, for let's say for Greece, because they have Greece in the story, so they have to be shot in Greece, otherwise they lose, a huge element of the production. And there are many other, most of the other productions that, that they can be shot anywhere if the location is right. Well, for the past couple of years, we've had many productions coming to Greece that were supposed to be Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Iran, Iraq, southern France, Italy, Spain. We had we have a film coming from Russia, which is set up in the Second World War. It's gonna be shot in one of the Greek mountains. It was supposed to be Alaska. So we, I don't know how close the Greek mountains are to Alaska, but probably they are. So anyway, we had a huge variety of films coming. That we have a science fiction movie coming this summer, which it's going to be a science fiction movie. Nobody will understand that it's Greece. It's going to be a big budget science fiction movie from a well-known American director. So yeah, we managed to. I mean, if you see Tehran on Apple TV, you will never understand and realize that you were shot in Greece. And all the roads and all the signs are in another language.
Ωραία, ωραία. Για να θέσουμε τα ερωτήματα σωστά. Γιατί έρχονται στην Ελλάδα? Για να γυρίσουν κάτι που έχει να κάνει με την Τεχεράνη, είναι θέμα ασφαλείας, το καταλαβαίνω αυτό. Αλλά Ρωσία, Ισραήλ, γιατί ποιος είναι ο πρώτος λόγος που έρχονται στην Ελλάδα? Είναι η αριστεία του συνεργείου ή το πρόγραμμα έκδοσης φόρου?
Especially for the Russian company, it was the fact that they were looking for some military airplanes from the 1940s, from the Second World War, and we happen to have them. We happen to have actually we are one of the 3 locations in the world that currently has those airplanes in Athens, outside Athens, in one of the military airports that actually are also operatable. They can fly. So they really wanted those airplanes, and we helped them in having access to those airplanes, and this made all the difference. So I think it's a combination of things. It's of course the financial incentives are very attractive, and now with the inclusion of non-resident labor, I think they are, as the guys at Netflix told us, they are the #1 incentive in Europe right now. But it's not only that. I think that we have solutions for everything.
So I have a question for Sharkey, and then for you, Pános, same question in a way, which is, Sharkey, how often do you find that the post-production service side of it, obviously when you're shooting, there is an element of post-production, that needs to be ticking away. How often do you find it be where it's a part of the country that you're shooting, on location on, and how often also, I guess, pivoting off that, I guess there's not those many countries that can offer up an interesting visual effects option. Obviously Canada, Hungary, UK, US, people like to talk about often, but in terms of post services while you're shooting, and maybe even, the added bonus of, hey, I can do some visual effects here under this tax rebate. How often does that kind of push the needle for you?
I tend to find that producers are very, and by producers I mean studios, are very reluctant to do full post services finishing anywhere other than Los Angeles, New York, or London, depending on where their home offices are, because obviously post can take over a very, very long time, and everybody wants to get involved. That being said, yes, the day-to-day digital dailies, on-set grading, that sort of thing, is a very important conduit towards post that has to happen locally. The visual effects aspect is always a very interesting one, because you find hidden around the world in the most unexpected places very talented visual effects crews. And I've walked into visual effects houses in never in. I think the last time I was in the region, I was actually, weirdly enough, I was scouting Macedonia, neighbors just next door. And I walked into a visual effects house and I didn't expect to see it, but they were working on the latest massive blockbuster movie for Hollywood, but it was all very quiet because, you know, they were subcontracting labor out. So I think the post-production side of things is a much harder sell usually.
But you feel like for the most part you're able to get the digital daily side of it, the just making sure that everything's working properly and feeding the post beast from afar. That's something you typically find.
Absolutely. What I have found, you know, particularly in sort of that part of the world, or basically anywhere outside of America, the guys there simplify the process. I tend to find that the American companies and crews overcomplicate it and cover it in mystery.
Okay, wait, that's enough. I don't need to hear any more of this American
Get out of
bashing.
here. Get out of here. American bashing.
No, I hear you.
What I find is that
yeah,
you know, that they demystify, they take a very simple approach, and it really works. It really works. So
Pános,
yeah.
like for Greece, is that, do you feel like that's something that you guys have been growing? Obviously post services, maybe companies are using the whole, you know, from A to Z in release, maybe they're not doing there, but in terms of digital dailies and the other types of production services that Greece can offer, do you feel like you guys are growing in strength in that area?
Well, the thing is, you know, as Sharkey said, you know, it's another issue. The whole post-production issue, you know, situation is another issue because of digitization. You know, you can shoot the film wherever you want, and you can send it. You know, you can send the dailies wherever you want, and have someone, you know, do all the whole post-production process, VFX and everything. You know, I remember when I went to the studio and I was actually. I saw, you know, how Hunter Killer, you know, the Gerald Butler movie was shot, and they were saying, you know, they shot the movie, many parts of the movie, they shot them in Bulgaria at the New Boyana Studios, and they were sending the dailies for post-production and VFX, and you know, they were sending them to Canada and London. So this is it's a totally you know, it's another issue. We basically, the cash rebate program and the tax relief program, they include, you know, they both include post-production expenses, and we even include also subtitling and dubbing, which is, I think, is unique as a cash rebate program. Yes.
So localization has become a huge industry with these platforms now. And it's incredible if that is included in your rebate. That's a nice little extra gift.
Panos, another question. It's quite easy to understand the percentage or the level of a cash rebate or a tax rebate or a tax incentive, but let's come back to, this is very important for the film sector. Richard was saying 5 technicians only in South Africa, but 300 in Malaysia. Do you have an idea when a foreign crew is coming to shoot in Greece, how many they are bringing from outside and how many they are using from Greece?
Well, you know, so far, because the productions are you know, are small productions, they are only bringing a few from abroad, and most of the crew is from Greece. Currently, as we change the rebate, and we also we put it to 40%, and we also put the non-resident labor. We are witnessing now in 2021 a huge change, as we have more and more big budget movies coming. You know, we have Disney coming, we have Paramount coming, we have Tom Hanks coming with Nia Vardalos. And you know, all these productions are gonna start using, you know, larger crews, and this is gonna put the Greece into a test. But from the initial numbers that I have, for example, Mia Vardalo's movie that I know that they're coming in a couple of months, they're going to have a crew of 300 people, and from those 300 people, 290 are going to be Greek. They're going to bring only 10 crew, only a staff of 10 people from the States or from Canada. And they will probably be the heads of departments, the director of photography, the set designer. So I think that if we manage also to set up a proper skills program as Sharkey described in South Africa, I don't think we're going to have a problem. I think we have to be very, we have to be very fast in our response.
The one thing I would add to that is just, well, the only thing I'd add to that is also, the level of support that you're having from, government needs to be patient as well, because, I've been in countries where we shoot one season of a show and then the politicians come down and say, hey, you did it. You don't need these internationals anymore. We've got a local crew. They can do it all. And they don't realize, it takes time. It takes time. And this is what Hungary did so successfully.
I remember the owner of New Boyana Studios in Bulgaria, the American. He told me that when they bought the studios 15 years ago, in the movies that they were actually shooting for Millennium Media, they were using 90% or 95% from abroad and 5 or 10% from Bulgaria. I just watched the latest Sylvester Stallone Rambo movie, which was shot at the New Boyana, and the guys told me, if you see the credits, they are all Bulgarian in Rambo.
So Panos, how many crews do you have? Like when you think, like, because often Sharkey and I will talk about different countries, and I'll just innocently ask, well, how many crews do you think that country has? Because they'll talk about different countries and go, well, okay, so there's 3 major productions there, so you're going to need to do more of a hybrid of people in the country and outside of the country. Do you have a clear feeling yet of where Greece is at in terms of, like, we've got 3, 4, 5, 6 crews that we think can handle large production?
I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you, but 2021 is going to be a good test for that. I will tell you next Christmas.
Yeah, fair enough. Sharkey, I have one last question for you. Sorry, if I just may ask you this quick question. When you're looking at these different countries, how much is the type of stages available or lack thereof an issue for you? Because obviously, if you recall way back when on Rings, we had a couple of great stages, but then we shot in a lot of warehouses. So, how much of that plays into account, no matter the size of the production for you guys? And then Panos can tell us what he's got for that.
Yeah, it's always nice to have big fancy sound stages in a well locked off, secure studio environment. But as I often say, I'm standing there in countries on locations. I often remind them of the fact that on Lord of the Rings, we shot in a paint factory, and that was the genesis of Stone Street Studios. But you can shoot anywhere, but you have to make compromises, So it is, but it's always better to be in a soundstage where you've got full control. But otherwise, you can make it work. It just depends how precious or demanding, that your director and DP and soundman are. What do you got, Panos? Have you got nice stages for us?
Well, in Greece we have small sound stages compared to the sound stages that you can find in London, for example. They are mostly used for TV series, which is a thriving industry here in Greece. And but we currently have 2 big investors that they expressed interest in building sound stages in Greece, and we are looking into that now. Which is it's nice.
It's a process. Yeah. Patrice, you were going to say something, Patrice? I was afraid we might have cut you off. Sharkey, is there any other things that kind of pop? Because I do think that one program you came across in South Africa was great, and you know it's wonderful to hear that they're doing that. It's like it'd be nice to see that replicated throughout the world. Maybe it's becoming more and more so. Was there any, not to put you on the spot, was there anything else that you were like, oh, you know, this was kind of interesting, this other country was doing, in a way to kind of help facilitate, you know, more business or better collaborative environment with the people of that country and foreign crews?
Yeah, you know, I think we've sort of hit the sweet spots, you know, in terms of, you know, education and knowledge transfer and financial support and infrastructure. And, you know, everyone's at a slightly different level and they bring different things to the party. You know, I'm in Australia right now, and, you know, they have a very evolved incentive program, and but they're suffering from their own success as well. I mean, there is the old notion in business, you can grow too fast. And, you know, I have a show running in Melbourne right now, and because of the pandemic and this notion that Australia is seen as a safe place to be, there has been a rush of international shows coming into Australia. And now it's very difficult to crew up with local people first, or then interstate people who you're flying across Australia, because, you know, there's lots of people here, and then finally bringing in international crew. So you have to be sensitive to that at the moment when you're budgeting and telling the story to your financier. But yes, there might have been a film that came in last year that just took 5 technicians, but this year there are 5 more film productions in town. So you're going to have to bring more than 5 international. You're going to have to bring in 50, because the local crew base has now been diluted across so many more shows. So it's a dynamic, ongoing situation that you just have to be aware of and not get tripped up on. And that's where we rely very heavily on you know, local production service companies, their knowledge and the support that they have from the national film commissions.
Pános, are there any, in the same way that there's this thing called the European Union? I mean, is there any kind of, for a country like Greece, like any sort of, well, we have a close relationship with our neighboring country. If we find we need to add crew or service or something, there's, you know, this country next door, or if you're looking for, you're doing a sea show, and, you know, granted you can be out on the ocean and you got your camera barge and all the rest, but, you know, it'd be sure nice to have a you know, infinity pool. There's Malta not far away, and we've got a close relationship with Malta. Is there anything like that that goes on with your organization or with, you know, what you guys are trying to do there?
Listen, it's obviously, you know, there are the Balkan countries, you know, are up on the north and very close to Greece, and it's easy, you know, but it's also, you know, you see in Greek productions, you know, like, for example, when we need the costumes, many of the costumes come from Italy, because they have a huge variety of costumes there, you know, and in very good prices for rental. Of course, you know, Balkan you know, crew is much cheaper than other crew all over Europe. So
very experienced.
And very experienced. Very experienced. Very experienced.
Serbia, Montenegro,
Romania,
yeah. You know, when I was in Hungary, last time I took a big production there, I think actually was Marco Polo. And we ended up going across the border to Slovakia because 2 reasons. One, Hungary didn't have the mountains that we needed, but Slovakia do. They had some beautiful mountainscapes bordering Poland. And 2, also Slovakia were trying to push their own industry and had a rebate program which was designed specifically to work in harmony with the Hungarian one. We were able, strangely enough, without harming either country's ambition, to take Hungarian crew into Slovakia, to continue attracting the Hungarian rebate, but also attracting a Slovakian rebate on top of that. And that was I don't know if it was by design, luck, or judgment between the two governments, but both governments got the inward investment that they needed. They got the cash registers ringing, they got the taxes paid back into the coffers of their particular countries, and the film benefited from being able to enjoy both sets of rebates. That's a fairly evolved way of working the tax incentive and rebate system, which can often make the difference between certainly independently financed films making up the difference between being able to finance and make the movie or not. You know, we did something very similar years ago in on a film for Focus Features. You know, we couldn't afford to shoot it in the UK, up in Scotland. It was just too expensive, but we needed the Scottish landscapes. So we shot the show mostly in Hungary on their stages, and then took the Hungarian crew to Scotland. And we're able to travel that Hungarian rebate and enjoy the Scottish rebate, and everyone was a winner in the end. So
Sharkey, I kind of want to steal you for one last thing though about these large productions. This is a bit of an unfair question, but when you go into a country, let's say you go to Greece, and you're trying to figure these things out, how much do you take into account, like, okay, well, I'm only bringing these keys, I'm bringing these HODs or not. How do you deal with you know, just, well, how seamless is this production going to be if, you know, the crew, you know, is all local, but you're going to have a crossover between your designer and, you know, let's say in the costume department, you got your costume designer. At what point are you transitioning to the local crew? How much is language an issue? How do you navigate those things, or how much does that become an issue for you, you know, in terms of dealing with these large productions in a country like Greece?
You navigate it carefully and with respect, you know, to you know, whatever the local culture is. You know, predominantly, you know, the work that I work on is English language driven for you know, an English language audience, and therefore you bring in the heads of department because they will know what the client, if you like, the financier, the studio are demanding in terms of the way in which the camera is moved, the way in which a story is told, because every country, every region has their own cinematic language, their own cinematic history. You know, the expectations of an Indian audience and what they see on screen is very different from the expectation of a Chinese audience or an American or a British or Australian. So a lot of bringing in the international crew is very often not because we don't believe that the skills levels are at a certain point. They might be very highly skilled, but what they might be lacking is the cultural nuance which is expected in the country of primary viewing, which traditionally the biggest market has been America. But you now see a big shift. The shift of the money and the finance is moving towards high-end television. It's moving towards your Netflixes, your Apples, your HBOs, your Amazons, and a bunch of other streaming platforms which have a very much more of a global outlook. You know, Netflix themselves, you know, 5 years ago, 80% of their subscriber base was English language, and 20% was not English language. You know, but they wanted to change their model for global domination around, because they realized that actually 80% of the world don't speak English. They would prefer 80% local language and 20% English. So we're in a really strange position right now, and it's not just about language. It is about cultural sensitivity. It is about cultural expectation, and it's about exporting national values. You know, Australian filmmaking has a certain flavor about it. They've got some very, very good Australian films that have gone around the world, like be it, you know, Kate Winslet was in The Dressmaker a few years ago, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. They're all very Australian films, and they have traveled and they've sold internationally. So it is an opportunity in this new world that we're living in, you know, with these global distribution platforms, for countries to sell and promote their culture. You know, I guess I don't know if it's a good or a bad example, but how many years ago, you know, did My Big Fat Greek Wedding, you know, come out and show the world a celebration of Greek culture. You know, yes, it's through a comedy, and yes, I think a lot of the characters, I'm sure, were heightened and caricatured, but I'm guessing it was an export of Greek cultural values. So, and there are probably many more examples that, you know, we could bring up and discuss, and I'm sure they're very politicizing as well.
Yeah, Panis, how do you, in terms of the cruise, how much is language, you know, is there a, you know, in terms of dealing with, you know, translation and thankfully someone's translating my stupid statements throughout this talk, but, you know, in terms of cruise, how do you guys,
well, you know, because we are a tourist country and we focus very much on, you know, on the language issue, we, you know, all schools in Greece, whether they are public or private, you know, they have 3 or 4 languages that we learn, and English is a second language in Greece. So that's not a problem. That's definitely not a problem. You know, they are all more or less fluent in especially in the English language, and you know, many of them know also a third language, whether it's German, Italian, French, Arabic, Russian. You know, it's. But I'd like also to comment on Sharkey's point that through the platforms, I think there is it's a great way for other cultures to promote their own productions, and you know, we see many countries like the Scandinavian countries with their dramas and their police, you know, the detective thrillers.
Noir.
Yes, exactly. You know, the Latin American productions, the Turkish TV series, the soap operas. There are many cases, and I think that Greece can capitalize on that if we play it well. You know, it's a great access for local production to thrive through the platforms and be introduced globally.
Αν και είχαμε κάποια προβλήματα στην αρχή τεχνικά, η κουβέντα πήρε μια πάρα πολύ ωραία ροή και πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρουσα. Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Αν δεν έχετε κάτι άλλο να συμπληρώσετε, θα ήθελα να ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ τον Πάνο Κουάνη για αυτή την ευκαιρία που έχει δώσει μέσα από αυτή την κουβέντα και στους Αμερικανούς παραγωγούς να καταλάβουν ακριβώς περί τίνος πρόκειται και τι γίνεται αυτή τη στιγμή στην Ελλάδα και τι επιχειρούμε να κάνουμε. Τον Sharkey για όλη αυτή την πολύ μεγάλη του εμπειρία που την κατέθεσε σήμερα σαν εδώ μαζί μας και πραγματικά ήταν αρκετά πολύ διαφωτιστική κάτω από πολλά σημεία. Το Rick, ο οποίος έχει μια μεγάλη εμπειρία και σε συνεργασίες με πολλούς ανθρώπους, οπότε μπορεί να το δει πολύ σφαιρικά το θέμα. Νομίζω ότι θα μπορούσαμε να κλείσουμε εδώ την κουβέντα. Θα ήθελα απλώς να πω ότι όλη αυτή η κουβέντα πάρα πολύ σύντομα θα έχει ανέβει στο YouTube, οπότε θα μπορέσει να την, όποιος θα ήθελε να μπει και να την δει, και θα μείνει στο YouTube, στο κανάλι YouTube του EFF. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Περιμένουμε το Richard και το Rick να δουλέψουν στην Ελλάδα και με όλους αυτούς τους πάρα πολλούς ανθρώπους που μπορούν να φέρουν, και εμείς θα είμαστε ακριβώς στο ύψος όλων αυτών των περιστάσεων, γιατί η Ελλάδα πιστεύω ότι είναι πια έτοιμη. Θα έλεγα και από την εμπειρία μου από την Ιταλία, ίσως και σε αυτή τη φάση θα μπορούσα να πω ότι είναι και πιο έτοιμη και σίγουρα από το κέντρο και κάτω της Ιταλίας είναι πιο έτοιμη. Ο Βορράς εντάξει, ο Βορράς της Ιταλίας έχει τις ίδιες δυνατότητες με εμάς. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για σήμερα, για αυτή την κουβέντα. Ελπίζω να σας δω πάρα πολύ συχνά, να σας βλέπω συχνά εδώ στην Ελλάδα και να σας δω πολύ σύντομα. Richard and Rick, thank you. Πάνος, thank you so much.
Εγώ ευχαριστώ και τους δύο, και τον Rick και τον Richard, και εσένα για τη φιλοξενία.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Panos.
Thank you.
I thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you here in Greece.
Thank you, Patrice, also.
Yes, Patrice, thank you.